Welcome to Indus Special. I am Ejaz Haider. Zalmay Khalilzad, U.S. Special Envoy for Peace and Reconciliation in Afghanistan, visited Pakistan today and held meetings at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also called on Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Khalilzad is set to begin another round of talks with the Taliban mid-April. On Thursday, while on a video call in Afghanistan, he was reported to have said that we are seeking that an agreement should be reached between Afghanistan and Pakistan that can result in peace and can stop the interference Pakistan has made in Afghanistan. Khalilzad also said that he urged Pakistan to play a more positive role. He said if Islamabad desires better ties with Washington, their policy towards Afghanistan must change. Otherwise, US and Pakistan relations will not improve. During the upcoming round of talks, the Taliban delegation is likely to meet with Afghan politicians and civil society activists, including with some representatives of the Kabul government in their non-official capacity. The Kabul government is unhappy to the point where the Afghan NSA Hamdullah Mohib made disparaging remarks about Ambassador Khalilzad, angering US officials who have since declined to meet with Mohib at official meetings in Kabul. The general sense is that Mohib was voicing the sentiments of President Ashraf Ghani. Some reports suggest that Kabul is watching the peace process from the sidelines, the implication being that it has been sidelined. Other reports suggest that Khalilzad is a controversial figure in Afghanistan. Where exactly the situation is headed, we shall discuss today with Farzad Lami, who is an Afghan journalist and writer based in Washington, D.C., Tanya Goudsouzian, who works at TRT World and joins us from Istanbul, and Najmuddin Shaikh, who is a former foreign secretary of Pakistan. Mr. Shaikh, if I might begin with you, what do you make of this entire talk about Khalilzad being a controversial figure in Afghanistan, Mohib's comments about him, and the fact that, as some analysts suggested, that Mohib was voicing President Ghani's sentiments with reference to talks?
As having a desire to become the viceroy of Afghanistan, a position that, according, I think, Mohib and a number of Afghans felt was the position he occupied when he was ambassador of the United States to Afghanistan, and therefore that he was really the man in charge, that he had ambitions of becoming the president of Afghanistan, and was considering a candidature also when the last poll was held. Last election was held. So this all comes from the background that he has as a prominent political figure in Afghanistan before he became ambassador and before he became the United States representative for Afghanistan. It does not, I think, really reflect what the feeling with regard to the negotiations themselves are. I think there the feeling is that he is not pressing the Taliban hard enough for fulfilling the two conditions that are essential from President Ghani's perspective or from Abdullah's perspective, which is that the intra-Afghan dialogue and a ceasefire. Now, the question that you raised earlier with regard to whether Pakistan's role is what Pakistan's role has been or is expected to be from in terms of American expectations, I think when he says that the United States expects a more positive role on Pakistan's part, one should recall that he has been very positive in his remarks about the contribution that Pakistan has made in the past. And I think there is the expectation that Pakistan will try harder to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table. I think perhaps there is a sense that the Pakistan has more influence than it has exercised so far with the Taliban. I think what he forgets is that right now, for Pakistan, peace in Afghanistan is essential, and that Pakistan will not hesitate to do whatever it can.
That's always been Pakistan's position. Stay with me, Ambassador Shaikh. Let me go across to Farzad Lami in Washington, D.C. Farzad, what do you make of the internal political divisions in Afghanistan? We've got reports which say, where analysts say that there are stark divisions within the government in Kabul that have been laid bare as the United States and the Taliban carry on negotiations aimed at ending the nearly 18-year war.
Thank you very much for having me. Actually, before going to talk about the Zalmay Khalilzad efforts about peace talks in Afghanistan, let me discuss something. He put up a tweet on March 12 saying that the U.S. and the Taliban have agreed about 4 issues. First, counterterrorism issues. Second, U.S. troop withdrawal. And third is intra-Afghan dialogue. And fourth is a comprehensive ceasefire. I have a question about the sequence. Because in every negotiations between 2 sides, you have to have a ceasefire first, then a dialogue, and then other things that the opposite side wants to achieve. I think the U.S. has agreed so far about the U.S. withdrawal. Still, we don't know when the withdrawal will begin from Afghanistan. And the counterterrorism thing, the Taliban has promised, reportedly, according to Mr. Khalilzad, that the Afghan soil will not be used against a foreign government. This is something the Taliban has been saying for years, but has not complied about on this. Before 2000, post 9/11, when the U.S. asked the Taliban to deliver Osama bin Laden, they said no. The Osama bin Laden has not done this, so we're not letting any foreign citizen use this.
Okay, so I want a clarification. Since we're going back to post 9/11, but pre-U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, I think the Taliban position was that they cannot hand over bin Laden to the U.S. unless they had specific evidence, and in which case I think they mentioned the OIC, and they said that they would hand over bin Laden to the OIC. They didn't exactly refuse to hand over bin Laden. They just said that the U.S. could not arbitrarily ask for him.
The U.S. and the world countries knew that even they provide evidence, the Taliban is not going to deliver or surrender.
That's Farzad Lami. That's a conjecture. That's a conjecture. I mean, we are now using a counterfactual because that never happened.
As far as I remember, the Taliban was not ready at any cost to deliver Osama bin Laden to the United States, and that's why they even gave up on power.
Okay, go on.
Yes, and before about Mohib, the National Security Advisor, when Mr. Khalilzad was visiting Kabul and met with President Ashraf Ghani for the first time, Mr. Mohib was on a visit to Kunar province in eastern Afghanistan to visit Afghan security forces. Yes, I understand there are some problems between the United States and Mr. Mohib after he made some comments about Khalilzad in Washington, D.C. But I think he spoke for president. I agree on that. And the president is speaking on behalf of the nation. So the nation, the Afghans, don't know what's going on in Doha. The U.S. is briefing Pakistan, as Khalilzad did today, Mr. Qureshi, and also Afghan officials. But efficient information that the Afghan officials need to know is not there. So that's our question, and that's the Afghan officials' concerns.
So are you saying that while Mr. Khalilzad is briefing he's not disclosing the details of or the fine print of the talks?
Well, I don't know about what kind of briefing is being made with president or other Afghan officials, but as far as we know in the media and from the presidential palace, they're concerned that they don't know about the details. They just know the talks are going on. They just know that they agreed over something. And several times Afghan officials and spokesperson to Afghan officials have said that they get the news on Twitter actually from Mr. Khalilzad first. Then
that could possibly.
They're angry.
On a lighter note, that could possibly be because now apparently all the heads of government and states have decided, the ministers have decided that they have to put out policy statements through Twitter. And of course, the US president takes a lead on that. So that could possibly be one reason.
Let me stop you there. If you're referring to President Donald Trump, that he conducts foreign or domestic policy through Twitter, so that's non-conventional. That's not what's the politics and diplomacy is being done between countries. That's a separate thing.
I'm happy that you're old-fashioned like me. I fully agree with you. I think Twitter should not be used for making policy statements. But it seems that increasingly world leaders have resorted to Twitter and put out policy statements. It's not just Donald Trump. There are others also that are doing it.
There is a difference when you put out a tweet. So you're informing public. Yeah. But before that, the head of states should know what is going on and what the other side is going to say on Twitter and the public. That's the difference.
Absolutely. I personally totally agree with what you're saying. As I said, we are old-fashioned, but I guess this is the new digital world, and we'll probably see more of it rather than less of it. But one point before I go to Tanya, you talked about the Americans said that the Taliban have to assure them that the Afghan territory will not be used for attacks on the U.S. interests or the interests of the U.S. allies. But what was reported was that the sticking point was not that the Taliban were not prepared to say this, because they've said this. And you also mentioned that they've been saying this for years. But the sticking point was that they said that we are not going to use the term terrorist because we do not agree with the U.S. definition of terrorist and terrorism.
Actually, do you have any question that 9/11 wasn't planned in Afghanistan? So this is the first question. So everybody knows, and after 9/11, after the United States attacked Afghanistan in October 2001. So we all know that the 9/11 was planned in Afghanistan, but no Afghan was a part of it. So what basically the Taliban did and are doing currently, they harbored terrorists, Osama bin Laden and his fighters, and they planned it in Afghanistan, and they used Afghanistan as a launch pad. So there is no guarantee from the Taliban side that the Afghan, if they take over or if they merge the government or whatever the outcome of the peace talks is, there is no guarantee that the Taliban will comply with what they have agreed or promised the United States.
Okay. Tanya, to further the discussion along these lines, do you get a sense also in your analysis that the Kabul government has essentially been shut out of this dialogue process, and that is something which is not entirely positive overall, or at least from the perspective of the Kabul government?
Well, without a doubt, going back to the statements by the National Security Advisor, Dr. Hamdullah Mohib, whether or not they represent the views of President Ashraf Ghani, we cannot say. But what we can say is that they certainly express the frustration and anger that many Afghans feel, both within the government and outside the government, at the continued marginalization of the elected government of Afghanistan from these talks between the US and the Taliban. You can't blame them for feeling angry and frustrated. But these talks have been essentially shrouded in secrecy and basically mired in controversy since they began.
Okay,
because they are essentially being held between Afghan opposition politicians and the US government and the Taliban.
Okay, but here's the thing. This entire process essentially begun after President Trump said that he wants to get out of Afghanistan. And he got Zalmay Khalilzad to begin the process of talks with the Taliban. Now, the Taliban have stuck to certain positions. And so therefore, in order for the talks to proceed, the Americans had to sort of agree to the fact that the Taliban are not going to talk to the Kabul government in the first instance. But what Zalmay has been saying, and that's what he said at USIP also, that the idea is to bring it to the next level where the Taliban are prepared to sit with representatives from Afghanistan, and that's the point where the Afghans are going to decide among themselves how exactly they want to proceed from that point onwards. So I think, in a way, given the fact that there's certain intractable positions, this was the only way forward as far as the Americans were concerned.
Well, exactly, as far as the Americans were concerned, that this was their objective, to pull out, and the first step was to start talking to the Taliban. But that meant making concessions that some have considered perhaps premature in order for those talks to take place. At the moment, for instance, the sticking points appear to be the ceasefire and timetable for U.S. troop withdrawal. But frankly, while these talks are going on, the Taliban continues to wage attacks across the country, continues to take more territory.
Yeah, because there's no ceasefire, as Farzad said, that there is no ceasefire. He obviously also objected to the sequence of this. But since there is no ceasefire, the Afghan security forces continue to operate against the Taliban, and the Taliban continue to attack the security forces.
Yes, that's what's going on. And meanwhile, the Afghan government continues to be left out. Yes, he was in Kabul. Yes, he met the president for consultations. To what extent those talks will be influential in the next round of talks, will have influenced the outcome of the next round of talks, remains to be seen. It's just at the moment still optics. There's also other factors to consider. There's other controversial aspects to these talks. The fact that we've had statements come out reassuring Afghans and the world that an agreement with the Taliban would not necessarily mean going back to the dark days of Taliban oppression, notably for women and human rights issues. But all we've been hearing are words. We don't really have anything that inspires confidence.
Okay, there is one other interesting aspect of this, which has something to do with the Afghan internal politics also. And let me quote from one of the articles that highlights this. This is, of course, starting with the fact that Kabul has been sidelined, goes on to say, adding to the ignominy of being left out of the US-Taliban negotiations in Qatar, some of the president's rivals held high-profile meetings with Taliban negotiators in Moscow. Now, there's also that element where the current political opposition to President Ashraf Ghani have met with the Taliban, will be meeting with the Taliban, will be discussing certain things. So that adds to the government's problems.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but when the Taliban does meet with these people, they meet them as independent politicians rather than as representatives of the government. And that is a problem because they do not acknowledge, they do not recognize the Afghan government. The institution is rejected. This is a problem in terms of bringing the president and representatives of the Afghan government to the negotiating table.
Okay. Ambassador Shaikh, what do you make of the fact that the Taliban are prepared to meet with, have met with, and will be meeting with the Afghan political opposition and civil society activists? So do you think what they're signaling is that while they are still not prepared to talk to the government, what they call the puppet government, they are nonetheless reaching out to other Afghans, getting their input, and therefore playing it very smart?
Well, in one sense, you can say they're playing it very smart. In another, I think you have to acknowledge that what they're doing is exactly what was also the American plan, that the negotiating partner has got to be the Afghan government as it is presently constituted, but an Afghan government which is more broader, which includes all elements of Afghan society, and therefore is broadly more representative of what Afghan society, as it has evolved since 2001, would want to be able to agree upon with the Taliban. So, you know, this particular phenomenon, this particular fact has to be taken against the background or against the expectation that there will be a Loy Jirga in April, and that Loy Jirga is the one that is going to determine exactly what the negotiating position is going to be and who the negotiators are going to be. This is what I foresee as being the result of the Loy Jirga that is to be held. But there are other elements that one must take into account, and I think in doing so, one must look at what the SOPCO report, the latest report by the U.S. representative on Afghan reconstruction, has said with regard to the continued dependence of the Afghanistan itself on assistance continuing from the international community. You need $4.8 billion dollars a year to maintain the Afghan National Defense Security Forces. You need more than 51% of the Afghan budget of $2 billion to be met from foreign sources. And these needs are not going to diminish because nothing has happened yet which suggests that the Afghan economy is on the uptick or that the Afghan economy is now producing more. There have been figures about Afghanistan's exports having climbed to $1 billion, but much of that climb has been by air travel, air shipments, which have been heavily subsidized to the extent of 80% even in some cases. So the economy continues to be in very bad shape. It needs continued assistance. The Afghan National Defense Security Forces have not been up to the mark, and there is no evidence that they're going to come up to the mark in a short order. So therefore, you must know that the negotiating position is not one of terrible strength. On the other hand, there is the fact that, of course, the Taliban continue their attacks and continue to try and occupy territory, but the change in the amount of territory that they hold has been fairly minimal so far. I mean, you can talk about it being, the control being over 14% or about 16% and 40% being contested, etc., etc. The Afghan government and the Afghan forces have not lost as much ground as some of the reports would seem to suggest, as some of the attacks by the Taliban and the success of these attacks in terms of knocking off individual units in Afghanistan is concerned. So we have a very difficult situation ahead, and that difficult situation makes it even more imperative for Afghanistan's neighbors. That is why Uzbekistan has offered to host a meeting to bring the two sides together. That is why the Central Asian nations have expressed their concerns, and that is why particularly Pakistan is concerned that some advance must be made towards peace. It is not that a negotiated settlement will be reached immediately. What you will have, hopefully, if all goes well, you may have an agreement on talks and you may have a ceasefire, but the talks themselves will last for 3-4 years before you can work out exactly what the Taliban want in terms of changes in the constitution, what they want in terms of unelected officers that they will hold. So it's going to be a long process, but I am not as, should we say, pessimistic as others with regard to the possibility of what Pakistan can do and what Pakistan needs to do, or what lies ahead for Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
Please remember, in this, I just want to add one thing, because we were talking about how the Taliban say that there was no Afghan involved in the attack. Afghanistan has been held responsible. One must remember that by Steve Cole's account and by other accounts, the Taliban said after they'd been vanquished by Daisy Busters and others, that they told President Karzai at that time that we want to return, we want a general amnesty, and we want to live as ordinary citizens. We do not wish to, and
absolutely,
perhaps later become.
But there was a lot of military hubris at that time, Ambassador Shaikh, which is why that particular offer was declined. But thank you so much for giving us your insights. Farzad Lami, there's another problem here, which is quite apart from what's going on as far as the talks are concerned. And that has to do with President Ashraf Ghani having alienated much of the country's political elite, including ex-President Hamid Karzai and his allies. What kind of impact do you think that would have on the internal political situation as also on the dialogue with the Taliban?
I disagree with that. I don't know who is saying that President Ashraf Ghani has excluded elites, including President
alienated, President politically alienated.
Okay. Yes. So one thing, let me make clear something, that all Afghans, including President Ashraf Ghani, including those oppose him, they all want peace and negotiations with the Taliban, direct negotiations. But we are debating the cost. So President Ashraf Ghani, as a head of state, head of the government, wants the government to be involved in the talks, while the rivals allegedly accusing President Ashraf Ghani of mishandling the process. But everybody wants to hold direct talks with the Taliban, as they did in Moscow like a while ago.
Correct.
President Ashraf Ghani is talking to every current or Afghan officials to know their idea about peace talks. A couple of days ago, he met with former President Hamid Karzai and other prominent officials and the Afghan society to know what exactly Afghans want and what to do to make sure that we are on the same page. As Mr. Ejaz said, that there will be a consultative lawyer jirga. Let me correct him. This is not a lawyer jirga, traditional lawyer jirga. They are
yes,
not,
this is not.
This jirga is not. This jirga is not making a final decision. This is providing consultations to the government to how to go forward in talks with the Taliban. Let's see what's going to happen. The Afghan government reportedly wants the next round of talks with the Taliban after the consultative lawyer jirga, which is scheduled now for 29 April. And let's see, but I think the U.S. is trying to have another, as you mentioned earlier, trying to hold negotiations with the Taliban in Doha mid-April. I don't know, I believe there is a disagreement about when to talk to the Taliban again.
Yeah, that's correct. But there's a general that mid-April is likely to be when they meet again. But give me a sense of what Ambassador Shaikh was talking about in terms of the state of the economy and the kind of money that Kabul would need to run its day-to-day affairs as also to fund the Afghan National Security Forces. Do you think there is any remaining appetite among the funders to continue to fill the Afghan coffers with outside funding?
Well, when it comes to fund Afghanistan or Afghan security issues, this is not only helping Afghans. World countries are helping them, actually. When they are spending billions of dollars in Afghanistan, they are doing for Afghan security, of course, and also for the world security. If they stop that, what's going to happen next 9/11? I think.
How can you be so sure that there could be?
Yes.
How could you be so sure that there could be another 9/11? In the sense that I think there's a sense that the Taliban have no, any kind of plan. It's very difficult to suggest at this point in time, despite the talks, that the Taliban will return to power in any meaningful way, unless they become part of the political process. And secondly, even if they were to return to power in some political way, that they would allow some group. AQ is already finished in the area mostly. As far as the IS elements are concerned, the Taliban have been fighting them. So why would you suggest that there could be another 9/11 if the Taliban return to power?
I didn't say that there will be another 9/11. I said if the world countries, especially the United States, stop funding the Afghan government and Afghan forces, there could be another 9/11 because of Taliban and other terrorists, because there are not only one Taliban group. As you mentioned, the ISIS pretty much are there, but not compared to the Taliban militants. I mean, if they stop funding and the Afghans, I agree that the Afghans and Afghanistan are suffering from the weak economy, and it's all about the war. So is Pakistan, and we all know it's because of war. If we make peace in Afghanistan, it's better for everybody, including Pakistan, which is struggling economically.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Farzad Lami, for your insights. Tanya, what do you make of the fact that increasingly analysts talk about Ghani's government being very weak, internally divided, and also the rivalry with the political opposition? He might have met Hamid Karzai, but the fact is that Hamid Karzai and his affiliates, when I was in Kabul, for instance, talking to various people, I got a sense that these people think that Ghani has been unable to deliver on every count. So you think that that kind of internal divisions, political divisions, could impact the talks, or the Taliban could make use of those internal divisions?
Well, I certainly think there's a battle of narratives going on. I've spoken to people in the government, close to the government, and I've spoken to people who are part of the Afghan opposition. And certainly it is a battle of narratives. Yes, I've heard the allegations against, the accusations leveled against the president. You know, at the end of the day, there's an excessive focus on the man's personality. There's an excessive focus on the man himself, when frankly we forget that he is the president, he's the elected president of the elected government of Afghanistan. And this is not about one man, this is about a system, a government system that was set up after 2001. And many of these Afghan opposition leaders who are part of the US Taliban talks were integral to setting up that system. So there is very much the feeling I get talking to the Afghan members of the Afghan government and people close to the Afghan government is there is this fear that what they're doing is dismantling this very system that was set up at Bonn. You can't reject talking to the government simply because you don't like one man.
But here's the thing, it's not, I agree with you that it's not just about President Ghani, but here's the thing, he is calling the shots, or at least trying to call the shots as the president. And yes. For instance, this consultative Loya Jirga that's being talked about, Barnett Rubin, as you know, is a close Afghanistan watcher for many, many decades. He said peace cannot be concluded by the executive office of the president or his appointees. So it's not just one person who's saying that Ghani has not really been able to deliver. There are an increasing number of voices who are saying this.
Yes, but he's got to be a part of it at the very least. He can't be excluded from the process. Peace cannot come by talking, as our colleague also pointed out now, peace cannot come by talking to the Taliban alone either. That's just one armed group operating today in Afghanistan. You've got plenty more. The Afghan landscape has changed dramatically since 2001. You have many other armed groups operating in the country. What other armed groups? I can't, the list is long. And as you said, that one of the agreements that the Taliban is considering making, or has at the moment said anyway, that they will not allow Afghanistan to be used by other groups to wage attacks on other countries. There are groups operating in various parts of the country, and peace cannot come by talking to one party alone. The Afghan government has to be brought into the process because
I think that's the plan, at least as per Ambassador Khalilzad when he spoke at the USIP. He was quite clear that at the next stage, the idea is for the Taliban and other Afghans to sit together and work this thing out. This is all the time I have. I'm afraid, Tanya, thank you so much for being on the program. We shall take a short break and return to discuss the Foreign Policy magazine scoop, which says the US count of Pakistani F-16 fleet has determined that all the jets are present and accounted for. Welcome back to Indus Special. On 27th February, as the Pakistan Air Force was given a go-ahead to hit targets in Indian-occupied Kashmir, a daylight mission while the Indian Air Force was on high alert, the PF jets completed the mission and then lured the IAF planes that were pursuing them into an air ambush. In the ensuing dogfight, India lost 2 jets, a MiG-21 Bison and a Su-30 flanker. The MiG's pilot, Wing Commander Abhinandan, bailed out in Azad Kashmir and was captured. The flanker's wreckage dropped in IOK. It was the second bad day for IAF, which had earlier failed to achieve its bombing mission on the morning of 26 February. The Indian military and the media, while they couldn't deny the MiG hit, denied having lost a flanker and instead started the fiction about Abhinandan having dropped an F-16 before being hit himself. This was said so many times, written about so many times, that it became an article of faith with Indian social media activists as well as analysts. The Foreign Policy magazine has finally put an end to the fiction by stating clearly, quoting US defense officials, that the US has checked the F-16 inventory and found that all jets are present and accounted for. To discuss this, we have with us Air Marshal Shahid Zulfiqar Ali. Thank you, Air Marshal, sir, for being on the program. What do you make of this? We were constantly saying that no F-16 was hit, but obviously the Indians were making a contrary claim. Now, this controversy has finally been put to rest.
Thank you, Ejaz. Obviously, the Indian statements coming from their officials all over were really meant for the Indian public and to cover up their failures, like you pointed out, the loss of the Bison and the Su-30, and also, by the way, now it is also confirmed that they lost an Mi-17 due to friendly fire.
Correct.
From
Correct.
within.
Yeah.
So they lost 3 aircraft, and on the other hand, they didn't achieve anything in their bombing mission. They made a very absurd claim of having destroyed a camp, and they even counted the number of militants that they had killed. So it was basically a media thing. But now on the F-16 side, by the way, they even gave a name of the pilot.
Which was a fake name.
F-16.
It was a fake name, and the Pakistani social media and the people in the know obviously contradicted that and completely. So yeah, that was another fiction.
Yeah. So we know that it was all absurd. Now we have this, I should say, from responsible people who always investigate such claims. And obviously, this is a very well-respected magazine. And it's not that they sent their reporter here to count the F-16. In the F-16s worldwide, not just in Pakistan, there's a very unique system of integration where you are sharing constantly whatever is taking place. I mean, this is basically, it was designed to ensure maintenance and safety, so that if something happens in any country on an F-16, it is immediately shared by others. And if some precautions need to be taken, if some modifications need to be taken, then it is done. So essentially it is that. And this is how the magazine, obviously, I think, got the information that all the F-16s, they were reporting data, so to speak.
Correct.
And none of the numbers, the tail numbers, was not reporting. So I think this sort of a thing is finally laid to rest all those accusations or claims that were being made. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if the Indian media or the Indian officials will respond to this. I don't think they can question this in any way unless they have some evidence, which they never were able to produce, and I don't think even now they have any evidence. So let's see what goes on from there.
Absolutely. I need to ask you a technical question because this article at one point says it is possible that in the heat of combat, Varthaman, which is the surname of Wing Commander Abhinandan, flying a MiG-21 Bison, got a lock on the Pakistani F-16, fired and genuinely believed he scored a hit. Now, from what we have seen, the pictures that were shared with us, his air-to-air missiles were unreleased. So it's I don't see how he could have fired and genuinely believe that he scored a hit. But what exactly is a lock on the F-16? What does that mean?
Yeah, okay. You see, there are a lot of disconnects here. But first to explain your question, a lock-on, you know, for example, the JF-17 or the F-16 or any other aeroplane which is equipped with this radars, they are scanning the area. Then, you know, you can reduce the scan and you start looking at a particular area and you start seeing targets there. So then you pick up a target which you think is a threat or is within the range of the missile, and you designate it, and that's called a lock-on. When you designate, the radar stops scanning and just fixes on that particular blip. Okay, now what happens from then onwards? Once you have locked on, now you can release or launch your missile, which is a radar missile like the AMRAAM, okay? And now the target has maybe, 20, 30 seconds to do whatever it needs to do to avoid the missile hit. Because once the missile travels on the radar beam, and follows the radar beam. So when you have a lock-on, the missile is just following that beam and it will go to that specific target. Even if it is maneuvering, the missile has certain maneuvering capabilities. So that is what it is. But the second thing I want to say is the absurdity is the Bison does not have a radar of that kind, you know.
Apparently, they say that they've upgraded some of the Bison fleet.
The Bison is the upgraded version of MiG-21.
Yeah.
Okay. But they don't, you see, like we have in our MiG-21s and in our Mirages, we have radars. But the capability is different from what the JF-17 and the F-16 have.
Okay. So another technical point, if an aircraft locks on another aircraft, the aircraft that has been locked on, would the pilot know that the other aircraft has a lock on it?
Yes. Most of these modern aeroplanes have these warning systems. They will tell you that there is a lock on. There will be a beep, 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 beep kind of a alarm. Okay. And they will know that there's a lock on. And that is like I said, now from then onwards, he just has a few seconds.
So that is how he will be able to take countermeasures, because he now knows that he's got a lock on his aircraft. So
he's got a lock on, and he has to take evasive measures or do something, jamming or whatever if it is a radar. Okay, and in this F-16, for example, and in the Sioux, it will even tell you that what kind of a missile is being launched. You know, is it a heat-seeking? Is it a radar? I mean, they have several sort of things.
Final question, sir. There was a lot of talk after this dogfight in India, and including by their Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, who said, oh, if we had the Rafale, things would have been different. If they had the Rafale, would things have been different?
I don't think so. You see, it's not an aeroplane. It's not a Honda versus Toyota. The air defense is a complete system. Okay, I mean the airspace management in a specific area, especially in a war area, hostile area, that needs so many things. Not just the aeroplane. The aeroplane gives you certain advantages, like beyond visual range launch of a missile. Okay, But to start with, you must have very good radar coverage, which is ground-based, obviously, which is giving you a complete picture of that area and identifying that which are the threat. For example, in this case, I would assume that there would be not just one aeroplane. There will be about 12 to 14, maybe even more aeroplanes in that area, sort of spread out, as a backup or whatever. Okay, so the one which is closer to you is the threat. So that is now from the ground radar. Second, very important thing is communication. Okay. Now, in the modern warfare thing, communication jammers can play up hell. The ground radar is trying to tell you something, and if it is not getting through to you, okay.
Which is why they have secure. Isn't that why? Because why the modern aircraft have the secure data links with the ground radar?
Yeah. So there you are. You see. So it's not just having a Rafale or whatever. The aeroplane is one component, so to speak.
One component of an entire system. Thank you so much. Air Marshal Shahid Zulfiqar Ali was giving us his technical input on the report that appeared in the Foreign Policy magazine. This is all we have for this week from Indus Special. We shall see you next week. Until then, it's goodbye.